This is Graduate a CEO, what it takes and what it means to become an entrepreneur, and why college is the perfect time to start your business. Here's Jim Hunter.
My guest today is Jared Judge, the co-founder and CEO of BookLive. Jared is an entrepreneur, musician, and web developer who has leveraged his diverse skill set to revolutionize the way people experience wedding music. Jared's journey began as a performer, but quickly realized that many couples struggled to find the right musicians for their wedding, and that's when he had his aha moment. He combined his entrepreneurship, musicianship, and web development skills to create BookLive, a platform that brings the best wedding music performances to couples. Jared, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's great to be here.
Well, good. Many entertainers have to be inherently entrepreneurial to succeed, especially when they're starting out. When did you discover your love of entrepreneurship and your love of music?
Okay, those are two very different times. The love of music happened when I was very little. I think I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. And my grandfather, who was, my hero, he took me to my very first live music concert. And it was a violin soloist playing a recital. And as soon as I heard those first notes of the instrument playing beautiful melodies and just sitting there right next to my hero, I fell in love with music right then and there. In fact, I loved it so much that when I got home, I grabbed some popsicle sticks out of the medicine cabinet that usually are like for tongue depressors or something, put them on my shoulder, and pretended to play violin for weeks after that.
Well, that's great. Well, that was the beginning of your music career. When did you first start playing the violin? Was that your first instrument?
It was back in 4th grade, so I was about 8 or 9 years old, and continued playing violin throughout middle school and high school. And throughout that time, I got itchy to learn how to play the drums, which my mom was not too happy about. So I rebelled against her and switched to percussion and drums in college, got my undergrad degree in percussion as a music educator. And during my music education degree, I wouldn't say that I discovered entrepreneurship yet, but I did discover the problems that would later be solved by entrepreneurship, which was lack of opportunity, just feeling stuck, seeing that I had only one option forward. Like, I didn't really want to be a teacher, but there was no other option to make a sustainable career as a musician other than becoming a public school music teacher at that time. So I discovered those problems, and later on when I went to UW-Milwaukee for grad school, that's really when I truly discovered my passion for entrepreneurship through a lot of the programs that you were involved with. Actually, you were a huge reason why I fell in love with entrepreneurship.
Well, that's great, and I'm glad you had that experience at UWM. That certainly seems to have launched you on your career. How did you experience your experience with web design and programming aid you when you were first starting to develop BookLive?
Oh yeah, it was huge. I felt like I was given this massive shortcut. In middle school, I've always been a tech geek. I've always loved taking apart computers and figuring out how they work. So I taught myself how to code, and then I started applying that to web design. I created a web page for my friend group back in high school. And then eventually, while I was in undergrad, I joined forces with a little nonprofit opera company, designed their website for them. But in grad school, when I started BookLive, I had no other way of managing the complexities of running a business while also being a full-time grad student with a TA position, expected to be at all these different events and help my professors. I couldn't manage all of that without automating a lot of my work. The first thing I thought of was like, how could I automate all of these repetitive tasks for the business I'm working on so that I could still have a 3.9 GPA by the time I graduate from grad school?
Wow. You certainly had a lot of obstacles to overcome when you created BookLive. you were going to graduate school, working and creating BookLive all at the same time.
Yeah, it was a lot to balance. I definitely didn't do the best job balancing both. I do feel like, my music professors could tell that my time and attention was divided. And I did have a few intense conversations about that. But, you got to do what you got to do. And I feel like it all worked out.
Well, that's great. You were able to complete that degree, and you created BookLive at the same time. How successful was BookLive while you were in grad school? Was that just the very beginning at that time?
Yeah, that was the beginning. Ground floor was, halfway through my first year of grad school. I didn't know where I was going with this whole project. I was just a musician. My main goal was I want to play more myself. I want to get more gigs, and not just the typical gigs, because for non-musicians, if you're looking into the world of gigs, you might discover that not all gigs are created equal. And many musicians, just because it's their natural default state, is to pursue gigs that don't pay well financially, but they might be rewarding from a fan base and exposure point of view, which is fun, but it doesn't pay the bills. And so I recognize that problem, that not all gigs are created equal. I want to pursue the gigs that pay good money, that actually could sustain a living as a full-time musician. And so in grad school, that was the first problem I set out to do, was how do I find these gigs? What are they? Discovered that a consistent base of high-paying gigs is actually in private events, which would be corporate events, events hosted by like Northwestern Mutual for their annual conference, or a wedding, playing some beautiful music as the bride and groom walk down the aisle, or even a nonprofit event where my music is in service of them raising $1 million towards their mission.
How in the world do you give guidance to people to get those kinds of assignments? That they sound like that's pretty far up the scale to get those heavy duty assignments.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure, because in music school and in all of the private lessons that I've taken on my instrument, no musician had ever taught me how to do that myself. And so I was just hoping that I would figure it out one day. Luckily, I ran into you. I ran into the Collegiate Entrepreneurs Organization and Brian Thompson and Nicole and everybody at the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center. And I actually brought this problem to you all as my mentors. And I said, hey, how do I find these higher tier gigs that pay musicians a lot more than the bar down the street? That was when I first ran into the concept of marketing yourself, which I know sounds pretty basic, especially here on an entrepreneurship podcast when, entrepreneurs know about marketing, but musicians don't. And so I had to learn that the hard way.
Well, you've certainly bridged the gap. You're certainly a musician, but you're also a business person. You've learned a lot on how to run a business and how to help others to do the same. That's fantastic. Now, how did you build and grow your team at BookLive? Are you a lone person in this enterprise, or do you have others working with you?
Yeah, we've got a couple others working in various positions. A lot of them are freelancers, like 1099 contractors. As the sole entrepreneurship, when you start out, you feel like you have to do everything. While you feel like you get a lot done, you actually prevent yourself from moving faster. Because, if somebody else is working on something alongside you, you've just effectively doubled your capacity to put out work. And it's really hard for entrepreneurs, especially, new entrepreneurs, to give up control over the baby that they literally just built from scratch. But sometimes that's the most effective thing that you can do. What kept happening, this actually, I grew a team while I was in grad school too. So in addition to automating a lot of my tedious tasks, I encountered that there were a lot of skill sets that I needed that I did not have. The first one was graphic design. I needed a logo done for both myself and for this company. And I could go and get a 4-year degree at a graphic design school, or I could just hire somebody to do that. And I chose the latter because I don't have that kind of time to go and get a degree in graphic design. And I learned how to manage people from that very small experience. How do I communicate my ideas and the result that we want to somebody who has expertise in this domain that I don't have that expertise? And so I had to figure that out. Wasn't always a smooth process, but at the end, it was amazing that I got the results that I had in my mind. And that was a successful experience for me just with that one trial project, that then I started identifying other areas that the business needed, other problems that I needed solved that I didn't have the expertise to do.
For an entrepreneur, that's one of the hardest things. If you're a single person starting a business, letting go with tasks, but still maintaining control is quite an art. And you've learned that with that first experience. So It's been enabled you to increase your capacity substantially.
Exactly. I'd say one of the most impactful hires I've made has actually when I hired a team member who had the same skills that I had, which one of those was software development. I was the original coder of the BookLive software, and I was spending, dozens of hours a week writing code, deploying it onto our repository, doing tests, making sure it all worked. And that was time that honestly was better served elsewhere. It was better served in the marketing and sales department, actually. So when I identified I needed to make more time for myself, I went out and found a software developer and figured out, again, how to hire them, then how to manage them. Because when you hire software developers, especially to take over a project that's already been in the works for a couple years, there is a lot that you have to teach them. Even if they already know the programming language, even if they already know the tech stack that you're already using, just the nuances of the way that you coded it. It's basically like training somebody on a dictionary that you wrote. You have to teach them all the words and then teach them how to make sentences out of it. So that was a very difficult process. Took a lot of time, took a lot of different software developers to audition and try out and decide some of them weren't good fits until you find the one that is a good fit. And then you stick with them long term, give them small projects to start so that they could have success and you get a result that you want. And they're learning along the way. Eventually they can start to do larger, develop large features for your app. And so that's been years in the making.
Yeah, that's great. Now, is that person that you found, is that person still working with you?
Yes, they are. Mm-hmm.
I assume that is somebody that's a 1099 employee, not a payroll kind of employee, or how is that organized?
Correct. They are contractors. I say they because they have team members that work with them too.
So you've hired out that function in effect, but you've made sure that their approach fits with yours.
Exactly. Yep.
How do you differentiate BookLive from other similar platforms in the market, if there is something that's similar?
Yeah, there really isn't something similar, because what BookLive is it is a back office tool that helps you with all of the admin work of running a busy musical act. So there's really only one other platform on the market that I know that does something like that. The big differentiator for us is that we have literally written the book on how to get those high-paying gigs that I was talking about at the beginning. And since I've literally written a book, it's called Gigging Secrets. I'm a published author. And I now incorporate training on this, on marketing yourself, on how to sell your valuable services to those high-paying gigs. I incorporate that into the app itself. Plus, we've got additional coaching programs, which none of the other competitors do that. They don't teach musicians, here's how to write the copy for your website that entices somebody to enter their email address so you can follow up with them and sell them your services.
Well, gosh, this is a completely different skill set than a musician would normally have. So you've really expanded their capabilities by providing that service.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because I do group coaching on Zoom with my musicians, and we had one yesterday where one of the musicians, he was struggling a little bit because right now is a slower time, where it's March 8th when we're recording this, and it's not wedding season, it's not necessarily outdoor gig season, so they were struggling a little bit financially. And they came to this realization that I've actually taught them how to be marketers and web designers, that they could then use those skills and get hired in other contexts for that too. And they were just so grateful for that.
That's great. Well, we have more to get to, Jared, but we have to stop here. Coming up in the second part of my conversation with Jared Judge, the co-founder and CEO of BookLive, Jared dropped some fantastic advice that could help students graduate a CEO.
If you can sell people either a pre-sold version of the product or sell them information on how to solve their problem, then you're making money before you've even built the product, and you're showing traction, which will help you get to the next level, whether that's fundraising, joining an accelerator program, or even bringing on key hires that will get you to where you want to be with building your product.
This has been Graduate a CEO with Jim Hunter. If you'd like to connect with Jim and learn more about why you should consider starting a business while in college, go to jameshunter.com. Graduate a CEO is a production of Advantage Audio.